Have you ever said yes to something when everything in your body said no, and then spent weeks resenting the entire situation? Or do you, at some level, equate assertiveness with being rude? Or do you make excuses like, well, I just want to be nice, or I feel bad, as a way to convince yourself that it's okay to not assert yourself, it's okay to not say what you actually mean because you're trying to be nice? Well, what if being assertive is actually the kindest thing you can do? Sometimes we assume that being assertive means being rude or being confrontational or being in some way unkind, when in fact, being assertive often is the best thing you can do for yourself, for the other person, and for the health of your relationship. So today I want to offer 3 key tools to asserting yourself with kindness. My name is Trisha Veldman. I am a speech and confidence coach and a spoken word poet. More importantly than that, I am a reformed people pleaser. I've spent much of my life being an unabashed people pleaser. I do things because I feel bad or I feel guilty, but I have very much learned the benefit and the power of being able to assert yourself in a very kind, pleasant way when you need to, and that's okay. And that is what I want to talk about today. You can find out more about me at powerfulandpoised.com, or I would love it if you follow me on Instagram or Facebook at Powerful and Poised for poetry as well as confidence tips. So the 3 key tools to assert yourself with kindness that we're going to cover in today's video are phrasing, tone, and perspective. Now make sure you stick around to the end because this is going to be a perspective shift and a reframe that can change the caliber of all of your relationships. But let's start with number 1, phrasing. There are a lot of ways that you can pocket pieces of assertion into nice phrases so that they don't sound too abrasive, they don't sound too off-putting or offensive to the listener. But a really simple one to implement. This is a rule that you can use in any conflict or heated conversation, is in general, try to avoid you statements and replace them with I statements or something more objective. What that means is, instead of starting with, you never arrive on time, or you didn't take out the trash, or whatever it is that you're trying to bring up or discuss with your communication partner, if you're trying to assert your opinion about something that another person is doing and you start it with you, it will immediately put the other person on the defensive. Instead, one thing you can try is to reframe the phrasing and start with I statements or a more neutral statement. So for example, instead of saying, you never take out the trash when I ask, you might consider, I feel so stressed when the trash hasn't been taken out. My nervous system feels on edge because the trash is piling up. Or the smell in this house because of that trash is putting me on edge. Therefore, you are asserting your feelings, you're sharing your feelings, you're asserting what you need without blaming the other person. And so if, for example, you're in a living situation and you're trying to get your partner to take out the trash, instead of saying, you don't do this, which is not inspiring to the person, you can use a statement like, I feel this way, or the smell in the room, whatever the repercussion is of whatever it is that you're asking for, is making something else happen. It's making you feel a certain way, or it's just making the house feel a certain way, whatever it is, then hopefully that will inspire the person to actually take out the trash, because now they're not being reprimanded and told, here's what you got to do. They're realizing, oh, my partner, who I love very much, is feeling anxious right now, and their being anxious is making it harder for us to have a nice interaction. And so what can I do? I guess I'll take out the trash. So that's something you can use if you're trying to confront someone about a desire you have or a need that you have that you feel isn't being met. Or if you're trying to set a boundary. Instead of saying, you can't do this, or you cannot be late anymore. For example, that's your boundary. You can reframe it to, I only spend time with people who show up on time. Or I will not go out with anyone who arrives more than 20 minutes late. A reframe to consider is just be cautious of not using you statements. So the first key is use phrasing that will keep whoever it is with whom you are speaking from feeling defensive. And a powerful way to do that is to never begin the statement with you. Try to find a way to either begin it with I, or better yet, make it neutral. This situation is causing X. For more on that, check out one of my more recent videos about how to set boundaries by changing how much you tolerate. Number 2, you want to think about the actual tone of your speaking voice. What often happens for very kind, nice people, people pleasers, people who say, I don't want to assert myself because I don't want to rock the boat. I just want to, just let everyone be happy. I'll take the sacrifice. What often happens is we don't assert ourselves until we're at the point of no return. And it's like, I've got to say something or I'm gonna break. And what happens then? We're in such a highly emotionally aroused state that we start to communicate the message and it just all comes out wrong. That's happened to me before for sure, where you think, no, I'm putting my foot down. And then it comes out in a very aggressive tone. But that is preventable. If you want to be assertive, but with kindness, I encourage you to actually practice the tone of your voice when you say certain things, because just the sound of your voice coupled with your facial expressions will change the way the statement is perceived. So for example, let's use a work example. Let's say you cannot take on any more projects, but your boss offered you a new project. You could say, I cannot take on that project. Because you're just like at your limit. You're like, I cannot take on that project at all. And you're like, I'm asserting myself, I can't take on that project. Or maybe you're so exasperated that you're like, I cannot take on that project. I just can't do it. Because you're not being unkind, you're not being aggressive, but you're just so defeated. But that also is not a very healthy place to come from when you're asserting yourself. The Goldilocks, the healthy balance would be to say something like, I can't take on that project. And then you can add some gentle phrasing like, thank you so much for offering. I really can't take on that project right now, but I look forward to doing something similar in the future. And that's it. You don't have to over-explain yourself, but just changing the tone of your voice can make a world of difference. Because very often we think we're coming across in a very sweet or polite way, and it sounds super aggressive to the other person. And it's not just about the words you say, it's about how you say it. Here's the thing though. You're probably not going to be aware of how the tone of your voice actually sounds unless you record yourself. So I highly encourage you to take out the voice recorder on your phone and say the same phrase multiple times. Fun fact, actually, when I was preparing to give my TEDx talk, which is called Tenets of Time, the short, the long, and the messy, there are some parts of that where I did feel a lot of resentment. I was talking about how doctors had given my mom like 2 months to live, and 4 years later, she's still going. And when I was practicing this with my boss, who is also a speech coach, he was like, you sound really angry and it's not landing well. And I was like, well, I am angry. But then when I heard it back and I realized like, oh, that's not landing. I'm sharing a point, but it sounds so aggressive that it's like people in the audience aren't going to feel comfortable listening to that. And my point is going to be missed. And so when I softened my actual tone of voice, it changed the whole experience of the speech. And yes, it was clear that, I was a little resentful towards those doctors, and it wasn't the doctor's fault. And that's not the point of the story. That wasn't the point of my talk. And so that simple adjustment in vocal tone made a world of difference in how the talk was perceived. If you want to learn more about that, check out my video, How to Keep Your Voice Calm and Authentic, which is about how to keep your voice stable when you are trying to assert yourself or trying to speak in front of an audience where you may be feeling a little bit nervous. But vocal tone is huge. So practice whatever it is that you're thinking, oh, I really need to speak up for myself on that. Practice the phrase over and over into your voice recorder, listen back to it, and try it with a smile. Because smiling, even just a gentle smile, will make your voice sound a lot warmer and therefore a little bit softer so it can soften the blow. Now, you want to be careful because you don't want to grin and say, I really can't take on that project right now, because that's going to feel fake because your facial expression would be misaligned with what you're saying. So you don't have to over smile. You don't want to over smile to the point that it's fake, but having a slight smile can help soften the tone of voice, and even just relaxing the muscles of your face can make the vocal tone a little bit warmer, so that even if you are saying something difficult, like there's no way I'm going to be able to make it on Friday, that's going to feel and sound warmer, even though it's not necessarily appropriate to smile. And the third key tool to asserting yourself with kindness is really put everything into perspective. At the beginning of the video, I said that asserting yourself is the kindest thing you can do. And I believe it really is, because when we don't speak up for ourselves, when we don't share honestly how we're feeling about something, that often leads to a lot of resentment. So if we agree to do something even though we don't want to because we're afraid to speak up, then we end up resenting the person later and then having negative feelings towards them. And that can harm the overall health of our relationship. Or if you're not asserting yourself at work, you're going to start resenting the job. And so speaking up for yourself is actually the kindest thing you can do, because it's honest. It's going to let the other person, it's going to let your employer know how you're feeling so that they know how to help you. If you don't assert yourself, you don't speak up for yourself, now the other person has to guess what you need, or they're going to assume everything is fine, or they're going to know that everything is not fine based on how you're behaving, but they're going to have to guess, like, okay, well, I don't know how to figure this out. And then it's going to be stressful for them when that could be avoided by you saying what you need from the very beginning. And this is where it gets so confusing, and people often get confused, myself included, a lot, especially a lot more in the past, where we think we don't want to be a bother, so we just don't say anything at all. But long term, it's actually worse, not only for you, but for the other party as well, when you don't assert yourself. So for example, back when I was living in New York City, I had a friend who would always cancel plans at the last minute, or she wouldn't even cancel. Like, I would be there waiting for her and send her a message like, hey, where are you? And then she'd say, oh, I'm so sorry, I can't make it. And this happened repeatedly until we had this big talk about it. And I was like, hey, what's the deal? And she explained she was so terrified to cancel plans in advance because she was so afraid of saying no and of hurting my feelings. And I had to explain, it's a lot more hurtful to wait till the last minute and then bail on me than to tell me on a Tuesday that you can't make it Friday. But she was so afraid that she would literally wait till the last possible second, and then it would be so much more painful for me and for our relationship. We had this big talk about it, and she was like, thank you so much for telling me, because I have always had problems with my friendships and I never knew why. So I talk a lot more about that concept in the video called One Powerful Key to Improve Relationships, if you want to check that one out as well. So in summary, the kindest thing you can do is assert yourself. If you want to learn how to assert yourself with kindness, I recommend practicing your phrasing. So you want to avoid you statements and instead switch those with I statements. I feel, or neutral statements. This happens when XYZ happens, as opposed to putting the blame on someone else. 2, you want to think about your vocal tone. Practice recording yourself saying the same assertive statement multiple times, and if it sounds very aggressive, try again till it's softer. And you might have to go to some extremes here, so it might sound a little ridiculous a few times when you practice it. Keep practicing till you strike that nice balance, and then that'll get easier to do in conversation. So you want to be careful when you're already emotionally triggered. Take a moment to pause, breathe, check in with yourself and your voice before you start speaking. Otherwise, it's really hard to control your vocal tone if you're very emotionally triggered, but not impossible. That's actually something I work with clients on a lot. So if you're interested in learning more about that, please send me an email at hello@powerfulandpoised.com, and we can have a free consultation to discuss your voice and how you can learn to better control it for situations where that might be handy. And then 3, keep everything into perspective. Reframe it from being assertive means being aggressive or being rude to being assertive is the kindest thing that I can do. And it is possible to assert yourself in a polite way, in a pleasant way, in a way that makes everybody feel good. Because guess what? Doesn't it feel better to hear someone own what they need and say, hey, I really would love to go to a vegetarian restaurant on Friday because I'm trying not to eat meat for all of Lent, for example, than going to a barbecue place and having your friends sit there and be uncomfortable the whole time, like, oh my gosh, I wish we had gone to a vegetarian place because I can't eat meat on Fridays in Lent. Just an example. But you want to think about how it is so nice and actually feels better for everyone around when people are just honest and it's not this wishy-washy like, oh, what do you want to do? What do you want to do? Whatever works for you, that's fine. It's like, it feels really good when someone just takes control and makes a decision and says what they need, because then you don't have any guesswork in it. So remember that being assertive is actually one of the kindest things you can do for yourself, for the other person, for your employer, and for your relationship as a whole. If you enjoyed that, you might be interested in my latest video on how to build confidence by unattaching and releasing expectations. Be sure to subscribe for more, share this with someone who you know struggles with people-pleasing or asserting themselves, and reach out to me if you have any questions at hello@powerfulandpoised.com. Leave a comment and let me know which of these 3 keys you find the most helpful.